Many races inhabit the continent of Tamriel. Some have, fortunately or not, fallen into the cracks of time, lost in the meanders of history. The Snow Elves are one of those races, while there are others, such as the Dwemer or the Elves, who have left behind their works of art, architecture, marvels of their technology, or arcana. The Falmer have left frighteningly little. Over the course of centuries, the knowledge of them has passed into obscurity, as near naught is left of their culture, bar few mentions in tales and legends. But in those stories are hidden grains of truth. By comparing accounts of the races and educated extrapolation, we can uncover some of their secrets and theorize on others. First, let's discuss their origin, or rather the lack of any concrete information on that matter. They were known to inhabit the lands of modern-day Skyrim, especially the frigid northern regions, and the mountains surrounding it, the Druidak and possibly the Volus and Geralt too. But how did they get there? Push forward a hypothesis. Their pantheons include Cyrabane and Finaster. These two heroes of the Oldmer became prominent figures in the elven culture in the Merethic era, which is very hard to pinpoint exactly when. However, it was after the first landing, after the settlement of Ordon. This religious connection implies the Falmer to be an offshoot of the Oldmer culture, yet have one more piece of evidence to back this claim. Take a closer look at the Altmeri Way Shrine from Somerset and compare it to the same structure of the same function, a Falmer Way Shrine found in the Forgotten Vale in northwestern Skyrim. Striking resemblance, isn't there? Sure, the materials are different, but the shape, the detail, and the style clearly indicate their origin to be the Isle of Alinor. Some historians argue that the Aldmeris, mythical homeland of the ancient elves, wasn't a place, but rather the unity of the race, which splintered as time went on. This divide would of course be spiritual first and then physical, so the sundering of Aldmeris could have been the varying focus of the Aldmeri faith. Later on, this would result in the Direni migrating to the Iliac Bay, Velothi exodus to Resdain, and simultaneous exile of the Orsimer. The Snow Elf faith also deviated from the mainstream culture of their ancestors. It is likely that they left to pursue their beliefs freely or were pushed out in disgrace as heretics. Both are plausible, knowing the elven obsession with praxis or flawlessness. Whether the Snow Elves split from Altmer or from the Direni is irrelevant. What is known then is their religion. Above all, they worshipped Oriel, unsurprisingly. However, they also worshipped Magnus, the sun, as a close second. Perhaps in their longing to return to spirit form, they saw the sun as a way to escape the mortality, and while out of reach, they needed to be closer, hence their choice of living in high mountains. This would also explain why they held Cyrabane in such high regard. He was the last to ascend to godhood of their race, and was the most recent reminder that it is possible and showing the path to achieve it. Historically speaking, they were probably the first race to settle in Skyrim. True, the Nords were said in their legends to be made by Kine atop the throat of the world, but their other tales strongly suggest that they left these lands during the Wars of the Dawn era to fight the Elves in the northern kingdom of Atmora. During their absence, the Falmer discovered the land and claimed it as their own, calling it Merith. Next, ages past went peacefully for the Snow Elves, allowing them to develop and refine aspects of their life. They emerged as a distinct race of white-skinned elves, pious and spiritual. Their mastery of magic was most impressive, exceeding the capabilities of other races. Some attribute this feat to their devotion to the sun and their proximity to it. After a time, they were well established, and it is then that the Atmorans began migrating back to their original home. Wave after wave, the invaders come sailing across the Sea of Ghosts. The first contact between the two races is not documented by either of them, but bloodshed swiftly followed. On one side, the Atmorans were returning home after ages of warfare against the Elves. Full well earned their hatred, they saw themselves as righteous liberators. The Falmer had also a reasonable claim to the land, and in their mind they were defending their cities and families from ruthless invaders. After some time, an uneasy truce was achieved, and temporarily, both Falmer and Outmorans coexisted. True, both sides were full of hurt and distrust to the other, both convinced they were in the right. During this time, the Proto-Nords have settled in several areas along the coast of Merith. Largest and most notable of them was the city of Sarthal. Using their mastery of the Thu'um, the men of North dug their underground warrens to hide from the elements. During construction of new lower level, the Outmorans have uncovered something ancient and of unknown purpose. Or at least it is presumed they found it, as the historical records are rather unclear from both sources. The mysterious object in question is the Eye of Magnus. What if, rather than accidentally coming across this enigmatic yet definitely powerful artifact, the Nords have brought it in from Atmora, spoil of war, captured by force from the Elves? It would have made sense for the ancient Elves of the North to have powerful items in their possession. It would also make sense for men to keep such items for their own gain. No matter the source of the eye, it was in possession of the Nords, who were not willing to share this secret with the Falmer. Yet somehow the Snow Elves found out, and perhaps they recognized it as item belonging to their kin of Elderwood, Atmora, or perhaps as holy object of Magnus, one of their most venerated gods. Or maybe they were aware of the power the eye holds. Either way, they were desperate to seize it from the Nords. What followed was a massacre that is now remembered as the Night of Tears. The Snow Elf forces fell on Sarthal at night, killing indiscriminately what at time was the largest Nord city on the continent. Left only 3 survivors, Isgramor and his 2 sons. Back in their kingdom, they rallied an exceptional force, the 500 companions. They consisted of the most skilled and fearsome warriors of the Atmora, and with their might they retook Sarthal. After the battle, the companions split up, each group seeking their own fame and fortune. They battled the Falmer wherever they were encountered. These events led to gradual decline and destruction of the Snow Elf civilization, as their cities were razed with such premeditation that not even ruins remain, save the chantry of Oriel hidden in a remote valley in the Druidic mountains. Their downfall lasted until the 1st century of First Era. The final battle took place in Solstheim, which at that time was not an island but part of the mainland. The Battle of Mosring. The Snow Elves, having nowhere left to run, made one last desperate stand. As both sides clashed, many lives were lost, but it is the death of the Falmer Snow Prince that ended the fight. With their beloved leader gone, the elven army fell back, routed and perishing. Up until this point, the Snow Elves held to a sliver of hope, not for victory but for survival. With their last ray of hope gone, their race went into hiding. Some were sheltered by kind-hearted Nords in secret from their kin. Others stayed in exile throughout the wilderness. Most, however, sought help from their deep-dwelling cousins, the Dwemer. The Deep Elves have resisted the Nords' invasion by the mechanical soldiers, advanced technology, and their impenetrable fortifications. Unable to root out the Dwemer, the Nords let them be, and since the Deep Folk prefer to stay underground, they too paid no heed to the Nordic conquest. It is to them that the Falmer came for aid. Perhaps they hoped that by their relation of blood, their distant relatives would reach out a helping hand. The Dwemer, practical, pragmatic, and calculating as ever, agreed on one condition. The refugees would be blinded. The Dwemer force-fed the survivors of the surface war a toxic underground mushroom which has killed their eyesight. What is peculiar is how the independent of one another and often competing city-states of the Dwemer have offered the same conditions of aid as if they had pre-agreed upon the course of action. The question remains unanswered, just like more. Why blinding their race? The Dwemer held any faith in disdain. Perhaps they wished to humiliate their pious kin. By taking their eyes, they would deprive them of the sight of light of Magnus, the magic and warmth of Aetherius. Perhaps The deep folk had secrets that they wished to keep away from the Falmer, we can be sure of that. But still, their mysterious contraptions remain hidden. Centuries after their creator's disappearance, surely they could keep the Snow Elves away from their projects. I think it is most likely that the Dwemer, in their hubris, willed to insult Auriel himself by reducing his chosen people to primitives, fumbling in the constant darkness of their mind. The next events are very unclear of the order they occurred in. Did the poisonous fungi turn the proud and noble Snow Elves into the reviled Falmer they are now? Probably not, as they have managed to build a magnificent statue during their service to the Dwemer of Irkentand. This has several implications. 1. The Snow Elves have retained many of their skills and craftsmanship for some time after the blinding. 2. The Dwemer must have paid little attention to the actions of their hostages, as the statue was carved in secrecy in a remote part of Dwemer city. It would seem that their cultural downfall and physical deterioration occurred further down the timeline. The Deep Elves used the blinded Snow Elves as slaves, which is strange as they had all their animunculi to do menial work for them. Most likely, they enjoyed the sight of the faithful so downtrodden. This slavery lasted for decades, perhaps even centuries, but eventually the Falmer had enough abuse and enough numbers to stage an uprising. The Nords on surface were completely oblivious of the bloody war taking place right below them. The Snow Elves, blind and malnourished, fought tooth and nail with the Dwemer and their machines. What they lacked in weapons, they made up with sheer numbers. Also worth noting is that while Dwemer's city-states had enormous fortifications, gatehouses, battlements and traps, they were not attacked from outside. The Falmer revenge came from within their cities. Another point is that the Deep Elves had just finished their own civil war, the Ethereum Wars. In their weakened state, they were easy prey for Snow Elves, whom chose to the perfect moment for their own rebellion. The War of the Crag was at its height around 700th year of First Era. At this point, the conflict has lasted possibly centuries, and in one moment, all the Dwemer vanished from the face of Nirn. Imagine what this must have been like for the Falmer. You have fought bitter and desperate war for hundreds of years, while blind, and suddenly your foes are gone. Unable to see, you would of course expect this to be an ambush, a trick. Deafening silence would only increase the paranoia. Soon, any motion, any sound would be met with savage attack. Who knows, maybe the modern-day Falmer still think that anyone, bandit or adventurer, wandering into their ruins is a Dwemer, returning to seek the Snow Elves' misery. After the disappearance of the Dwemer, the Falmer began to carefully got accustomed to their new conditions. They memorized the maze-like layout of the abandoned structures, learning from where the animunculi are coming from and avoiding traps. Over time, they domesticated choruses and spiders. Slowly they developed a new culture, as their bodies began to change, using the chitin from their pets to craft weapons and dwellings, cultivate mushrooms. They also began foraging out of the ruins into the surface world. After so much time spent in cold darkness, blind and sensing enemies on all sides, they emerged as hateful, malicious creatures, merely a shadow of once wise and noble race. Generations of crawling through the narrow underground passages have rendered them hunched over and grotesque, with pallid, sickly green skin. Their eyes have completely grown shut, their eyelids sealed, the nose retracted, allowing them to better track scents around them. Draped in naught but a loincloth, these cruel savages have designed weapons made of bog carapace. In combat, they prefer ambush tactics, poison, conjuration and destruction magic. What I find infinitely interesting is how did their physiology change so drastically. Some may suggest that being deprived of their beloved open air and sunlight, being denied the light of Aetherius, they found comfort in the embrace of Namira. It would make sense, the choice of their squalid lifestyle, affiliation with anthropods, and change of appearance. Certainly, they do not wish to abandon the tunnels they won from the Dwemer, just like the followers of Namira wallow in their misery. Let's consider the Chimer who have lived in Resdain for nearly all of First Era, but physically they were still the same elves that left the Somerset Isles. Only an act of the divine, or Daedric in this case, rendered them to become the Dwemer. Perhaps it is work of Namira which turned the Snow Elves into the reviled Falmer. It is important to clear the distinction between the terms Falmer and Snow Elf. Both of these terms mean the same thing, but in different languages. However, Falmer is used to describe the survivors of the Dwemer abuse, while Snow Elves refers to the pure and uncorrupted elves that struggled against the Nords. Advocates for the distinction are the Snow Elves themselves, for some of them survived as far as Fourth Era. They would refer to their fallen brethren as the betrayed, and they view them with pity. The sentiment is not returned, for the Falmer hate their kin as much as they hate anyone else. Those that survived the Nords' extermination and Dwemer deceit continued to live in remote areas, few in number but still prosperous. The Chantry of Auriel was built after the downfall of their civilization, and it is still enormous in a magnificent temple complex. It seems they preferred to build using white grey stone, carving it into even blocks. Domed roofs, arched walkways, and vast halls all were favoured by the Snow Elves. To be honest, the arches are reminiscent of the Aelid architecture, along with the way shrines tie their culture back to the Aldmer. The level of their craftsmanship can be seen in the detail on the statue of Auriel and the armours they wore. Seemingly, they used same alloy as Altmer to make their tools of war, the one which included moonstone. They preferred light armour with sleeveless cuirasses, as to not restrict their movements. This probably ties to their love of open space, and heavy enclosed armour may have made them feel uncomfortable. This is also backed by the helmets, which left the face completely exposed. The before mentioned alloy, while similar to Altmer's, must have different either in smithing process or the ratio of the components, as the result was not golden but ivory white metal, which was molded into desired shape. The armor pieces were adorned with thin brass design and red jewels. According to legends, in combat, the Snow Elves excelled at frost magic and in the usage of spears. As mentioned before, their faith focused on Auriel first and other gods such as Jeffre, Trinemac, Cirbane, Finaster second. It is safe to assume that Jeffre represented the nature, in case of the Snow Elves, the unforgiving environments of frozen wasteland. Yet, their adaptation to the low temperatures meant they could withstand the harshest of blizzards and even live in dwellings carved out of pure glacial ice. As such, they needed not to fight the elements and weather, but thrive in them. The figure of Trinemac was most likely revered due to the same reasons as other elven races, his valiant deeds during the War of Manifest Metaphors and the felling of Lorkhan. It is safe to assume that since Snow Elves split from their brethren, Trinemac wasn't a deity of unity, but more the patron of warriors. Now, I think that Cirbane and Finaster are exceptionally worshipped among their culture. Let me explain. For many living in the Forgotten Vale, or those who pilgrimaged there, the highest honor was to walk the shrines of Chantry of Auriel. This was no easy task, as individuals attempting this trial would be dressed in only a robe, defenseless and carrying a heavy ewer. Such person, an initiate, would begin their journey at one of the shrines, meditate and contemplate the teachings and wealth of knowledge gathered by their ancestors, recite their mantras. After completion of the study, the ewer would be dipped in the shrine's basin, taking some of its water with them, then walk into the next shrine. Once all shrines were visited, the ewer containing water from all 5 shrines was carried to the temple sanctum, where the water would be poured out in front of the Auriel statue, opening the way and granting audience with the archcurate, the head of the chantry. I wish to remind you that this journey took several days through inhospitable terrain and hostile fauna. Many would perish along the way or give up. It is said the ones who did not complete this journey and lived wished they died instead. They were shunned by the society forever, shamed and distrusted, for their failure was viewed as weak faith in their god, and they turned their backs to him. But what was the point in all this? The hardships they endured were a testament of their devotion and loyalty to Auriel. The water in the ewer symbolized enlightenment, and upon reaching the temple they were deemed worthy of Auriel's attention. They would be raised up, bathed in golden light, for a moment being one with the King of Gods. Clearly, ascension and return to spirit form that predates Mundus is of paramount importance to the Snow Elves. This is most likely why they hold Sirbane and Finaster in such high regard. They both are, after all, mortal mer who achieved apotheosis, either literally ascending to godhood, or culturally as their fame and honor turned into faith and worship. Finaster is the patron god of the Snow Elves' neighbours to the west, the Dreni. Considering the Snowfolk's obsession with ascension, perhaps they are an offshoot of the Dreni, who refused to participate in interbreeding with Needs and ventured further east. This would also explain why they did not pursue aid from the Dreni. Sour relations could be a reason why, instead of fleeing west, they fled underground. The Dreni clan has helped the Aelids in the First Era, so there must have been a reason why the Snow Elves haven't considered this possibility. The figure of Sirbane further implies Snow Elves to have originated in Somerset Isles, as that's where Sirbane rose to prominence. Perhaps they have left before that came to pass, and still the word of his achievements have reached the Snow Elves even in the far north. As for Magnus, the arcane god and grand architect, in elven myths, he abandoned the mortal realm, fleeing to Aetherius. In his frantic escape, he tore a hole in reality, and this tear is the sun that warms Nirn and gives life to the planet. It seems obvious that the Snow Elves would hold him in enormous regard, considering he gave them a physical goal and a proof of Aetherius. For their faith, he was the one to give them a tangible connection with their divine ancestors. The light, the warmth, and the magic pouring through the sun was a lens by which they could focus their devotion. In the writings of Vivek, in Sermon 17, the warrior poet and Nerevar have ventured north to Atmora. There, he wrote, they found nothing but frozen bearded kings. I know the words of Vivek must be taken with a grain of salt. However, Nerevar was Hortator for 284 years, from 416th year of First Era to 700th year of First Era. The travel to Atmora must have been taken place in that time frame, and the kingdom of Elderwood was already cold and desolate place. But as myths go, there is usually a kernel of truth in them. Such is the tale of the Ship of Ice. This Nordic story details the arrival of the last ship to come from Atmora. It is said a snow elf, no more than a child, approached the sailors before they set off. She spoke of the snow elf's sorrow, desperation, and despair. But the time has come for revenge, and revenge is best served cold. The child said that the Frostfall will now take Atmoran Kingdom, just as blood and fire has taken the Falmers. The story is dated to 68th year of First Era. Now, considering that snow elves were fought for centuries after the tale takes place, until the rule of King Harold, who died in 221st year of First Era, this means that 100 years prior to that, the snow elves could have had the numbers, and the strength and the aptitude to invoke such cataclysm on their foe. All in all, the snow elves are no more. Pity, as they are a fascinating species, which have captured the imagination of skalds, bards, and storytellers. It is also remorseful that no more remains of their grand civilization, if only for study. Perhaps there are still ruins hidden away in inaccessible areas. Who's to say, maybe some even survive to this day in the frozen Atmora.